Hey, good morning, everyone. That we have a quorum today, so we will proceed with call this meeting to order. A review of the on-site packets.
Madam Chair, there is no on-site packet.
Thank you. Are there any additions or revisions to the agenda today? Okay. We'll move on to announcements. Are there any?
I don't believe there are any.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes from June the 12th of 2023. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes? I saw none either. A good job. Minute takers at him. Good job. Do I hear a motion?
Andrew Goldsmith, board member, I move to approve the minutes of June 12th as 23 as written.
Thank you, Andrew. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. So we'll move on to unfinished business. The update on the investigative committee changes. Linda?
So on page 7 of your packet, kind of what we ended up with after last meeting. After this meeting, then we will begin meeting every 6 weeks in a virtual capacity on the 6-week mark. And I kind of laid it out for you on page 7, virtual. It's the week of October 23rd. That's the Monday. What I need for the committee to determine is what day and time of the week you're going to want to meet, what works for you, so that I can get all the players involved to be able to kind of like make that work. So does Monday start at 9 work, or did you want to look at a different date that works for you? And I don't think that we'll have, being the first time that we do this, I know that we're going to have some cases, but, it's estimated about probably 25, 30, 35 cases. So it shouldn't be an all day event like the quarterly board meetings have been. But we won't know until we get started and kind of figure out what we can do and which cases need to come to you at the virtual piece. The virtual meet via, the meeting itself will meet via Zoom, kind of how we did during COVID. And then the quasi judicial piece and the CAPA piece will be, we'll send you the links for those to meet, because those are closed sessions. So we won't take any business during this type of a meeting. Those will be reserved strictly for the quarterly board meetings.
How does Monday look for you?
It's fine. The earlier we can start, the better, because I'm on the other side of the country. But so that sounds 9 sounds great because that's
9.
Or if you want to do earlier, that's fine too.
Earlier would be better. The sooner we could finish up. Mondays are usually kind of rough for me to be out.
Okay.
That's why I was asking your scheduling. Mondays are good for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm really, of course, we have to keep in mind that this is my last term, so really don't base everything on my schedule because right now I'm flexible enough. I'm just wanting to get some feel for future down the road, and whatever board member may be assigned or two, after Wednesday.
Yeah.
We don't know. There could be
Right.
some new
That's true.
members.
This is true. This is true. Well, let's go with Mondays.
So whatever works, I prefer whatever works for you.
You want to start like at 8:30?
8:30 would be great.
Okay.
And I'm pretty. I guess I should add. I'm pretty flexible that early in the morning.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
What time frame are you not? Is it the afternoon that you're?
it's usually the afternoon because I
Okay.
typically don't start work until 9, but I'm 2 hours behind you. So
Oh, wow.
Where are you?
in California,
Wow.
I'm working. I'm doing a contract in California. So yeah.
Okay.
No wonder you keep saying the other side of the country. Like, okay.
Do we know
Yeah.
the day yet?
October 23rd is the
23rd.
6-week mark, so
23rd. Okay,
we can start with that time frame, October 23rd at 8:30.
okay.
And we'll see how that goes. And what issues we run into and need to adjust. Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Fine, thank you.
Mhm.
I think, I'm trying to think, with the time frame for the first time out, you said 25 cases. How long are we generally running per case? You kind
Well, in March and June, we had over 90 cases.
of, okay,
In September, I think we've got 66 cases. So I mean, it's gonna fluctuate. So I'm guessing if we can, 25 to 30 cases every 6 weeks. There is an option that we can look to perhaps just bring the drug diversions, impairments, those of significant investigations to you at the 6-week mark. And then hold like bed checks, CNE audits,
yeah,
HIPAA violations perhaps till the quarterly piece, but I won't know until I see the actual cases, how to do that and juggle that. So it's a learning process for us all, but willing to do that to kind of shorten then the virtual
well, that's a
component
good idea,
piece.
just so that you have some idea of the time, perhaps the time frame. So when we have a new board members on this committee, that might help them, kind of get a feel for that time slot too.
I think the impetus is to be able to get those significant cases processed timely.
That's right.
And not that no case isn't significant, but some are needing probably attention
Right,
sooner.
Right.
Yeah,
So
okay. That sounds great.
Um,
Finally coming to fruition. We're there.
yeah, that's how it goes. Mhm.
Just a quick question, what's your, guesstimate on how much that'll improve or the timeline of these?
The timeline for the case to be investigated.
Right.
Because I know that the Journal of Nursing Regulation says about 177 days is
Right.
what those 10 states were reviewed. I think the timeline is not just dependent upon the investigators doing that, but it's also dependent upon the responses to subpoenas. And we have some
Sure.
facilities pushing back, as well as then the licensee statement and
Sure.
when that falls. Rachel and I started meeting also to kind of integrate the investigative and discipline pieces together to kind of have a more fluid process. And so she, went back to saying, well, we can do 3 letters to the licensee. And I said, that's 90 days that I'm killing. And, we had done a study a few years ago. I don't know if you were on, but you were on, where we looked to see the letters that we were sending out with the last known address being in our system, and nobody was responding. So then we went and did a study to say the letter, we did a phone call, which we found out with the state system, it'll show up as spam or 000, and they don't always answer. And so then we did an email off of their email address and saying, just please call the Board of Nursing. And we were getting more response that way. So then the attorneys, the disciplinary council said, okay, well, use 3 methods, So Rachel was saying, well, then, if you do 1 letter and do those other things and do records that show that you did that, then do a follow-up letter in 30 days. So we're working through some of that.
Okay, to shorten that.
So
up.
that we can kind of, because the longer we drag that out, that's gonna increase our time to get it to you.
Okay.
So we're working at those things.
Mhm.
And that was just Friday, so.
Yeah, so I think ultimately this improves the timeline, this new schedule. It helps us to help you.
It helps, yeah, and then as long as we can get the documents in, they can get reviewed and we get witnesses and everything, yeah. In a perfect world,
Understood,
hopefully
yeah.
would, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions from you? We'll probably have some afterwards, just, after we have a trial at the first time out, but it does
Okay.
sound like it's gonna work. Thanks for all your hard work there, Linda. I mean, that's a lot. There's a million questions to have to get answered before we should get all that in line and ready to go. Wow. Okay, we'll move on to new business. The Impaired Provider Program contract update.
The only thing about this that I know is that I think that RFP might be ready now, or almost, it's being reviewed to go out, so. Do you have any other comments regarding the contract?
Actually, we're working with procurement. I don't think it's ready. There's been some discussion about possibly seeking an extension of 6 months, just to kind of help both sides out. It's very difficult to get this through in 60 days with everything that's going on right now. So we're in discussion.
Okay.
But, and I think what would be helpful is if, on the specifications and everything, if there's something in there now that, or if something's missing now that you wish was in there, now would be the time to speak up and give that information maybe to Linda.
Okay.
Because that's part of it, is we have to write down the specifications before the RFP goes out.
That was my next
Mhm.
response is, what major changes are we throwing out to negotiate from our end? I'm sure maybe they do too. I'm assuming too. So if you have any, you give them to Linda. If from our end, we're seeing some, something we would like this, considered before we sign the contract again for KNAP. And refresh my memory, how long is the contract good for? Is it every year? Every 2 years?
Well, usually the contract is 1 year, but then there's amendments done for probably about 5 years. And that's what we've been in the last few years, is the amendments.
Okay.
But the actual contract and the RFP process, usually only 5 to 6 years.
Okay. Next, we have the KNAP summaries. Statistical summary.
The quarterly report is in your packet. There was in June, I had mentioned that there was, the reason for referral was breaking it down to alcohol, drugs, and mental health. And you'll see, I think what is this, page 8? It's kind of twisted. We got an update in Adobe, so some things got reconfigured. I'm not sure why, but I'll look at that for next time. But you'll see they did do the breakdown then for 13 were referred for alcohol, 20 for drugs, 9 for alcohol and drugs, and they had 1 for mental health. So they're looking to add that piece for a referral. And then you have the annual report starting on page 9 for the last fiscal year. So 126 were in the program. State of residency was predominantly Kansas. The board status, some reason the pie chart didn't transfer over, but known as 97. That means the board knows about 97 of the 126. So we're running around 77% that we know when they enroll into the program. We do find out if they have a warning letter or non-compliance. We do get made known at that time throughout their participation. And then on page 14, I'll draw your attention to the released from program, successfully released. They successfully completed the program. 38% of them, those that were non-compliant, 49%. So not quite sure what we can do about that differently, but we'll look into that. Are there any comments about those 2 reports from KNAP?
Well,
Sorry.
that one part due to death,
Mhm.
I think we forget about that.
So am I seeing that correctly? Almost half are non-compliant?
That's what struck me as kind of, yeah.
Is it there after the first, second, and third? I mean, is it all overall, no matter what attempt.
This is when they were released from the program, so they would have had 3 non-compliances.
That's
Yeah.
happened.
So then those cases,
That's,
you know, with the delegation motion, we bring them back on a weekly basis, to see if they could go back in, if that's what the board wants.
that's still pretty high when you see it looking like that here. You know, when I see it weekly, I don't see that big picture of it.
Mhm.
Well, happened.
So is there reason to look at? I'm not really sure what the underlying reasons are, but is there a reason to look at the program itself to see why these are unsuccessful? In my opinion, maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
That doesn't
mean,
seem
it's-
successful.
yeah. I don't know that there is, if their survey is done from the participants to see.
I wish they'd do it, man, it's hard to say. I know a lot of them, they don't think they have a problem.
This is true.
This is what we're seeing with
I
the
read that a lot.
cases.
And you
With
know,
the
right off the
case.
bat, if the board makes them go, or they're gonna have issues with their license, then they go. And they play the game and they get out. So some of that, I get that feel, you know, when I review them, when they failed and they're coming back in, and you can tell by reading. They still don't think they have a problem. No, unfortunately, those nurses may end up in revocation eventually because we can't help them if they don't think they have a problem.
And
But
I
then
know
you have some that
financial-
thank you, that we've read
Sure.
that before too, that they thanked us for making them get in, because then after a couple of failures, maybe they finally did realize that they didn't have a problem, and we got some nice comments on that. It doesn't happen very often, but that's kind of the feel. So I like that idea, but I don't know if that would be helpful, because there so many of them don't think they have a problem still. Or they're fixed, you know, the problem's done, they don't have to go, they don't have to use those supportive services anymore, they're
Mhm.
done, you know, they don't continue that support system that they need to get out.
We keep seeing the same patterns get reemerge. When we see the cases. I know that some of them say they just can't afford it. But the habits they're doing,
If they'd stop those, they could pay
Yeah.
for it, yeah.
you know, it's kind of a vicious cycle of it.
It's a no end. It's hard to see that from our end.
But even
It
if the
is.
program was free, it would still be,
Mhm.
I don't have time.
I think my concern is, let's make it so that it's not, the onus is not on us, that the program is successful. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. They're not unsuccessful because of something that we're doing or something that the program is not capturing, that the onus is not on us. And I don't know how to maybe we could talk offline about how to create a survey or something, or an analysis or something. I just want to make sure that we're not creating that 49% of unsuccessful attempts.
I think when we went to that discipline case management conference and the
Exactly.
data that we heard, you know, the first 1 to 2 years is the time frame if they're gonna relapse and struggle. It's within that time frame that's, and I don't know if the 49%, how many are in their first 1 to 2 years, and that might be an analysis that we could look
Right.
at versus those who have been in the program 3 to 5 years or longer, because some have been in there for a little while. How often are they not compliant?
Mhm.
Because I think, like you said, once they get in, it seems like even the ones that I've heard from that successfully complete, they're thankful that we
Mhm.
stuck with them. So maybe there's an analysis we could dig into the non-compliance 49%, see how many are in that first 1 to 2 year period. Because that would meet with national data that we're seeing across the states. And I don't know what we would do with that then, but
And maybe we find out something that helps us tweak the program a little bit so that those first few years aren't so unsuccessful. I don't know either, to be honest. I just
It
want to
would
make sure
help.
that we're doing everything possible to make people successful.
okay. So you want like a percentage then of the 49% that are within the first 1 to 2 years of the program
excellent.
presented back to you.
Mhm.
I'll work on that.
That's a great idea.
But there's also a movement too, to start focusing on the mental health and not
Right,
just the
Well, that was the other piece. that I
So
was
there could
thinking.
be a change, let's hope, and maybe the outcomes, because now everybody's paying more attention to that
Mhm.
too.
Which is what we learned at the discipline case management.
I'm
conference,
hoping that
too.
impacts a little bit, because some
I
of it
agree.
is, it's such a combo, it's just not clean,
Mhm.
this or that. Especially with the nursing environment today, it's stressful, very
Agree.
stressful.
So and on the summaries, I don't know that we were, because it was all new still, did we present if there was a mental health diagnosis
yeah.
on those so that you would know that? And I don't know that we know that
Right.
very well either yet. So maybe that's another area to work on.
Exactly, and I think we were talking about incorporating some of that at the last meeting, but this to me says there's something else going on.
Oh, yeah.
Great point. Great point.
I know they do a KNAP initial evaluation, but through their program, do they do another evaluation ongoing to see how well, or if other things surface? I don't know
Now, that would be a good
if that,
thought.
do you know if they've ever done anything like that? And I don't know if that would, like a trigger might actually, a mental health trigger might actually show later.
Right, instead of upfront, that's a good thought.
We've seen in our reports, we've seen that also. I believe our investigators have pointed that out. Also in their records of mental health. Right, they've uncovered that
That's
also
true.
with their documentation, pointing that out for us.
And
Give us that
I do
insight.
appreciate that. It's
absolutely.
really helpful.
It does.
It really does. We're trying to get the big picture when we read it.
Well,
and
they're
they're
painting it for
Yeah,
us.
they're doing a
They're
great
letting
job.
us, they're covering the whole.
And then lastly, I don't know if that's gonna impact the impaired provider program contract is, but there may be something that we can tie in there. With the mental health diagnosis as to why they're impaired when they provide care. I don't know. I'm just trying to make links.
Mhm.
Because you have to remember, they pick who they go to get
Absolutely.
evaluated, and their
Yeah.
KNAP does not have an authority. We would have our preferences because we want a well-credentialed, well-rounded evaluator that would
Right.
think about the mental health part, but sometimes when you read those cases, you wonder, did they get the full scope of the
Exactly.
evaluation when we read them? And I'm sure doesn't that play a factor that they pick their own evaluator?
So you're saying that
The
KNAP
licensee then?
allows them to pick their own evaluator,
they
they may not identify the
Kind of.
mental health piece?
Yeah,
So is
Such
that,
a wide
is that
variety out
something
there
that
that-
you would like to see as far as like in the contract? I don't know,
I don't
I
know
don't
the
know how
answer
you
to
would
that question.
do that,
I
yeah.
just wonder, so I always wonder when a person is impaired, why they're impaired. Okay,
Mhm.
are they impaired because they have an underlying mental health diagnosis that has, first of all, not been diagnosed and they're self-medicating?
Mhm.
So that being said, that may link into updating this contract so that it includes what they just said. And that is, we pick the provider because we know they're going, maybe, I don't know. Or we specify what kind of provider they have so that we get them a
Part of
full
theirs.
assessment. So that if it does include a medical or a mental health diagnosis, we're aware of that. For them.
And if
I
they
don't
did
know
it
the-
as part of theirs, if they did an initial, I would like to see it as part of theirs, that they did an initial with recommendations for further evaluation. A screening. When you go to your regular doctor now, they have questions geared towards suicide, depression, anxiety. I mean, this is general screening questions that link us to telling more about your underlying concerns. I noticed that our our investigators are asking pretty close to these questions. They're not saying them exactly like that, but they're uncovering this information. I don't know what the screening questions are with KNAP. But if they're uncovering that kind of thing that says we need further, we're seeing signs that this is more than we just like, and I think that she's right. There is an underlying reason.
Mhm. That's kind of what the data kind of was showing us in May. Do you think the committee would benefit maybe from KNAP coming and doing a presentation to you
I would love
as
it.
to their
That'd be awesome.
program, and then you can ask these questions of them, and we can kind of get an idea? Okay, so I can set that up for December.
Okay.
Be great.
And I'm sure our investigators would like that.
So then if the contract is up in December, then you're working on an extension, then if
You can, if that's what you're wanting.
I mean,
I think it's worth conversation,
I think so too. I think,
even if there's some roadblocks to that process, but
Right.
at least they're hearing us and we're hearing them on how we wanna,
They can tell us how we can help them more.
yeah.
It's a two-way street.
It's true.
yeah, I just think we need to back up and see where the issues are. I mean, there's obvious, and I'd like it to, if we back up into our process and see there's an issue, we can change that issue. If it's the issue with the licensee, then that's a whole different story. But with this success rate, I think it's worthy of backing up into our process before it gets to the licensee. And maybe it's even making some specifications on what that provider, the credentials of that provider, or maybe it's the specific questions they have to ask or whatever, but I look at this and think, something's not.
Right.
So you're looking at a cause effect type thing, yeah, okay.
On our
On our
process.
end, yeah, versus what
We
the
can't control other
licensee, right,
people, but we can definitely
right,
look at our process.
okay. So I'll get KNAP to come in December and
That's a
present
great
to
idea.
you, and
Thank you,
then,
Linda.
so be thinking of your questions that you want to ask them, so. Yeah.
Did that complete your?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
I
what I
just
have.
didn't,
I'm sorry.
okay, I didn't know if you had some more or not. Okay, now we're gonna approach the new regulation review process, and if you could just kind of explain, I love the piece of paper. I think I'm understanding the process, but did you want to kind of just explain it to make sure I got it down right?
Yeah, so beginning on page 15, you have the instructions. Carol has written these out, and I think they're very well written. So the part 1 is the history of the regulation, and we've completed that section. But the part 2, the necessity, the potential for revocation, and additional information. These are the 3 areas that the committee and the board have to determine. Hannah and I will take the notes. What we've had a couple of meetings to figure this out because we're all new to this. But what we're going to do is take your comments, your statement, and then we will write that up and then re-present that back in December for you to re-review and approve at that time. The investigative committee only has 2 regulations to consider, which is nice because the rest of the committees don't have just 2. So
Is that from here forward or just today? We only have 2 and we're done?
that's all that's been assigned to this committee is the 2.
Great, well, thank you.
Don't thank me too soon because
do
you
a lot
have
of reading.
other ones to learn.
The other ones I noticed there's a lot.
But they're all wanting to be done by, I think, July of 2025, but to allow Carol time to put them all together, we'd like to get them done by March of 2025, so that if there's any stragglers, we can get them in June if we need to, but It will be a process to put them all together, and she needs that time to do that. So, you know, for your other committees that you have things of this nature, you're gonna be working on these too, so.
Okay.
So we've done the part one piece,
Right.
and you'll see part two. There are character spacings. That's why we're gonna take notes to kind of figure out how to keep you inside that character spacing limit, if you want to make a comment. So you have the two, 60-3-110, unprofessional conduct as it relates to the licensed nurse, and 60-7-106, unprofessional conduct as it relates to the LMHT. So did you have time to review those before, and you want to make comments now?
Well, you know, on the regulation necessary for implementation and administration of state law, we have to have an unprofessional conduct. We have to have that, because how can we reprimand unprofessional conduct cases when we get them? So you know, as far as throwing that out, my answer would be, no, we need it. Right?
I completely agree.
No, maybe it needs to be revised and updated, or whatever, that's a different time, but we can't, I just can't imagine not having it available. Because it's unprofessional conduct, and it's so important for professional nursing.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I'm gonna say something, just a couple of things. Just as a reminder, this will be done for regulations only, not statutes. So you may be reviewing some statutes at some place, and
Okay.
they're not done the same way.
Okay.
And I just encourage you, when you think of some of this, to remember your mission of public protection. Because I think my interpretation, and I'll just tell you what started this whole process, is I believe there's some belief across the street in the legislature that the agencies have just way too many regulations and over-regulating and everything like that. So henceforth, that's where this law got amended to include all of this. So I believe the hope is that from them, that the agencies will find that they certainly do not need all the regulations that they have. So I would just encourage you also to try to tie it back to the mission, the public protection, as much as possible too, in your comments. That might be helpful, not to just. I'll keep my
I
mouth
think our
shut.
two are easier.
Yeah.
You know, the other committees might have more difficulty, but I thought ours is very clear. And we can't replicate either one of these.
And I think we don't want to provide loopholes either. I think I love our unprofessional conduct, and I'll just say I've compared it to other states, which are very vague.
Yeah.
This is very robust, and it covers, there's no room for misinterpretation. So I agree with you, Becky.
Yeah, that's not going to be that easy for us. That's just today.
Yeah, well, that's true.
We have other committees to, but I think it's a great idea. Maybe there's stuff in there that's been there for years and no one's needed it or ever
Sure.
looked at it or read it, or you don't even know it's there. So it's healthy. I think it's a healthy process to go through, but absolutely. These two are not going to be revoked. We're
So
keeping them.
under necessity, 1 and 2 answers are yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
And then do they need to then complete potential for revocation section? I believe you need to answer all of these.
Yeah, I
We have
think,
to describe what would happen if we did revocate it.
yeah, I think they just need to understand that you believe it should not be revocated. However, if you can explain what would happen and how that would impact Kansans if for some reason there was a decision to revocate both of these.
Yeah. you want to eloquently say that, there's gonna be patient harm. It'll be patient harm. Will they get it if we just?
I can't answer that. I would hope so, but you know.
800 characters, how many words is 800 characters?
I will just say this,
I don't know how many that is.
I believe when this report goes to the committee that I have to go over and present all of this on these 90 regulations, so,
This regulation gives clear guidelines to what is acceptable and not acceptable behavior as a professional nurse, which protects.
Hold on.
I know this sounded really good.
Yeah, this regulation
well,
gives clear guidelines as to what is acceptable and unacceptable.
Professional nursing that protects
Nursing,
Conduct or
Conduct?
behavior, what?
conduct, whatever
Okay,
y'all
what
want
word
to,
is better word, conduct or behavior?
conduct,
And that's nice behavior.
More legally. than-
okay?
Yeah.
Which protects our
Yes.
citizens of Kansas, citizens of Kansas, which is our goal,
Mission, it's our mission.
Our
board
mission.
Which is our board
which
mission.
is our board.
It's our board mission.
Okay, how's that, Kurt? Is
So
that
that-
enough characters?
oh, I don't know, we'll see. So this regulation gives clear guidelines as to what is acceptable and unacceptable professional nursing conduct, which protects our citizens of Kansas, which is the KSBN mission.
Okay.
Right.
And I don't know how to eloquently say this, but I think it also reflects public opinion. Any person looking at our regulation and looking at the conduct of a nurse and comparing the two would probably ask themselves the same question. So if a nurse did something, they probably would ask many of the questions or address many of the issues that are in the regulation. You know, did this nurse follow policy and procedure? Was this nurse negligent? Did this nurse leave an assignment? Those are all examples of regulation or pieces of this unprofessional conduct. So I don't know how to eloquently say that, but I just think a normal person might ask, a person who's not a nurse would ask these questions,
I hear what you're saying. I don't know how to say that shorter,
Yeah, I know that was too many characters.
That makes sense. That really makes sense.
Yeah.
Now that you say it like that, it does make sense.
Well, there is that area down for additional information, so we could put it in there.
Well, maybe you could, that's
If you want.
that's a good idea, because we never heard of this code of conduct either until we entered the profession of nursing.
Absolutely.
And then it became a key factor in our practice. So
Mhm.
I hear what you're saying. How can we function without the code of conduct?
Well, the thing about
Take lead.
about being a nurse is when one nurse lets down a patient, a family member, it paints the entirety of the profession. They tend to look at all of us as the same. It's very hard for them not to think that we're all in that same category. It's hard for them to trust. And it just takes one negative attitude, one look, one comment. So professionalism is key.
Good thoughts. I think we got that one.
As one of them.
So under additional information, you want me to write, when one nurse lets down one patient, it paints the picture for the entire team. It is hard for them to trust. Just takes one negative attitude, look, or comment, so professionalism is key.
unless you need to use better words.
Does that tie in your public perception that you were wanting?
Surely the basic non-educated about nursing congressmen over there would understand that's their language. I mean, that's, they don't know understand nursing over there because they haven't experienced it yet.
Well, you know, the family, my daughter-in-law experienced it this week. When my son was in crisis with the medicine, she asked the nurse again what she was giving my son, and the nurse didn't want to tell her. Well, you know, family is part of our nursing. That's part of what you're doing. You're taking care of the person in the bed and the person standing next to him, worried she's not going to have the person in the bed anymore. It's all part and parcel.
I think even many in the public who are not nursing have experienced nursing, they just experience on the other end of it, where they've been, they go to the doctor, so I just think that if we did not have this, they would experience the unprofessional. I think this regulates nursing practice.
It does regulate nursing practice, that's for sure.
Do you want to add that? You still have some characters. It regulates.
It regulates nursing practice. I think that's a powerful statement for them to hear.
I do too.
That's great.
So this regulation, no, this regulates nursing, okay. Nursing practice.
Yeah.
This regulates nursing practice.
The end.
So back up under potential for revocation 2, is the rule of revocation being revoked?
No.
Okay. Number 3, if the rule and regulation is not in active use, would revocation require change to the authorizing or implementing statute?
Where's the NA?
That's where, yeah, that's not applicable. Okay.
Yeah, where is the NA?
So if the rule and regulation is not in active use and revocation would require change in authorizing statute, which changes would be required? I don't know those. I believe these questions all came from
Them, yeah.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
so-
it was them, so they don't have the NA option. Well, they appreciate a blank on us, or they think we just didn't see, I mean, would they be okay if we didn't answer yes or no?
Well, we'll bring this back in December and you guys can look at it and then ask those type of questions. Then maybe we'll have more guidance
Okay.
at that time as well,
Okay.
because I'll give this to Carol and maybe she can get clarification.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that one. So then now we can move to the other one for the LMHT, or is that the similar?
It's probably gonna
I
be the
think
same.
the responses are going to be very similar.
Yeah. They pretty much parallel each other, actually,
Mhm.
just have different finals it's talking about.
Do you want me to write them up the same as I did for the
I think
60-3
so.
one?
I agree.
They also need that same
Okay,
conduct rules.
okay.
So we're done with the new regulation review process. Very good. Okay, we'll move on to quasi judicial.
That's the one. We need to do. All right. So you ready for me to move that?
Yeah. Just see what you- yeah.
I move that the meeting of the investigative committee be closed to deliberate on matters relating to decisions involving the exercise of quasi judicial functions as authorized by KSA 2013 supplement 754318 G1.
And I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We will now adjourn for Class A.
You know.
Okay. We will now resume our meeting. The next item that we're going to be doing is reading the motions. So, did you find where you start?
Right
Yeah.
here.
Mhm.
I move that the investigation committee find that reasonable grounds exist for believing the application or licensee is guilty of violating the Kansas Nursing Practice Act in the following cases, and that those cases will be continued for further proceedings conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. If you want me.
Oh,
Take turns.
I move that the investigative committee find the following cases to be closed for the reason that no action is needed.
Is there a second?
Oh, I second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I move that the investigative committee approve by consensus the case disposition represented on the spreadsheet entitled reinstatement applications.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Move that the investigative committee approve by consensus the case disposition represented on the spreadsheet entitled conversions.
Is there a second?
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Take turns.
Okay. I move the investigation committee approved by consensus, the case disposition represented on the spreadsheet entitled endorsement applications.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I move that the investigative committee approve by consensus the case disposition represented on the spreadsheet entitled inactivated by staff.
Their second.
I second it.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I move the investigation committee approved by consensus the case disposition represented on the spreadsheet titled new grads.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I move that the investigative committee approve by consensus the case disposition represented on the spreadsheet entitled cases not opened.
There's a second.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I move that the investigation committee approve by consensus the case disposition represented on the spreadsheet titled unlicensed practice.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, next item is the agenda for the December 2023 committee meeting. Any items that we need to put on there? We're gonna have follow up on the way we do our regulation review process, right? Is that when you're gonna come back and that'll give our final approval at that time? Okay,
I believe so, yes.
now that'll come back in December. Is there anything else?
KNAP presentation.
Oh, that's right, the KNAP presentation. And then some feedback from our
Discussion, yeah.
October meeting.
And Hannah and I were visiting about the chart in the annual report from KNAP versus the numbers that are in there. And there's some discrepancy, so we've asked for some clarification on that 49%.
Mhm.
So it might not be as bad, but at
Okay.
the same time, I mean, we still need to dig in
Sure,
probably,
right.
so, cause,
It's a good.
Thank you for looking at that closer.
yeah, cause the numbers didn't make sense. So I was like, from what their chart to their pie chart,
That's what you compare.
yeah, that's what I was
didn't even
looking at.
notice, I guess, I didn't.
I didn't
I
either.
always look at
the
pie
chart.
charts because they're, they're
Mhm.
just so much quicker to,
Mhm. It's a nice visual,
yeah, it's a visual. I didn't even compare the two charts. That's a good thing to
but
do
the
that.
data in the table reflected differently than what it was on the pie chart.
Which was better.
Well, there was no other in the data, but yet on the pie chart, there was a 12% of other, so I
Oh.
don't know what the other reference is. So I sent an email to KNAP to just ask for some clarification, so.
Really?
But then obviously there's reason for non-compliances that need to still be drilled down perhaps, so.
I agree, if it's just 12% of the 49%, that's other. There's still. is
There
what
was,
you're
that
saying?
was the 12% was in addition to the
Oh, okay.
49%, so I'm not sure
Okay,
how,
gotcha.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay. Very good. I can't think of anything else. Okay. We'll move on to adjournment then for today. So we don't need a motion for that, so we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.